good morning, good evening, good night, dear listener. Once again, you have opened up the great big door which has been marked closed for health reasons. And you found yourself once again walking into the old oil house. With me today, I've actually sold two of my usual co-hosts. Sold them into slavery. I decided I need to get some money for little things like, food and heat. So instead, I've managed to pull in two lovely, lovely people. The first one is... Don't I own you, Matt?
No. You are somewhat confused. I own you, and I own the internet. Therefore, I win.
According to this contract I'm reading, I actually own you.
Then...
I have just hastily scribbled it in crayon.
No, you see, I clearly remember buying you for 2 buttons and a lemon sherbet.
Introduce yourself.
I'm Matt. I'm the guy known as Time Lord, or Timey-to-Wimey. Hello, everybody.
And next to him is the staple, the linchpin of the old oil house. The man, if he went away and stopped doing work for us and did his own thing, it would all probably fall apart, and it would just be me every week by myself, weeping into the dark.
Hi, it's Tricky. I'm announcing a new podcast, so this might all go away. I'm also glad to hear that Adam's progressed to crayons.
Thanks. But we are not alone this day. Oh no. For we have a special guest. We have a man who, to be totally honest, I'll be quite frank here, I'm sitting here a little bit nervous, and it's not often that happens. We've got Mr. Special Guest. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, I am Joseph Brown of 13, The Gardens, Stockport, and I'm very proud to be on the Oil House. It's lovely to be with you, and I'm very interested in pointing at lampposts. I'm Dirk Maggs. I do radio programmes. You started me off. Well, it's nonsense. Get to the point. This is the new Cameron's Britain. We have to be efficient.
So lampposts. Yes. I like the ones with the globes rather than the lozenge.
I like a classic lantern myself with the slab sides and the beveled inserts. Yes, I'm Dirk. Hello, chaps. Lovely to be on the programme. Is it a programme? On the podcast?
Oh, programme, podcast, show.
Same deal.
Complete waste of time.
No, and everybody's thinking, who the hell is that? Who is this guy?
Well, that was actually going to be the first question I was going to ask you.
Oh, I'll try my best. Yes, please do.
For the people out there who may not be overly certain who you are and the work that you've done.
I'm sorry, I'm messing around.
Don't worry. The last time we had somebody on, we ended up talking about dolphins and the CIA for the best part of an hour.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah. Oh, yeah.
What have I got myself into? Okay.
This is why over emails I'm much more professional.
Yeah. Okay. Basically, I'm Dirk Maggs. Probably the one thing that will immediately nail me is that I was the person Douglas Adams asked to finish The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy in its original medium of radio, which we tried to do 20 years ago, actually, but then couldn't quite make it work. The BBC dropped the ball a little bit, so I eventually managed to do it about 8 years ago, sadly, by which time Douglas had died. But we did 3 series of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and since then I've adapted and directed it for the stage, and we toured last year the UK, and we're touring again this autumn with the original radio cast, original cast from 1978 and original cast from 2004 to 5, and most recently I've adapted and co-directed a series, an adaptation for BBC Radio 4 and 4 Extra of Neil Gaiman's Neverwhere, which had quite a starry cast. So that's where I'm coming from.
That's fantastic.
Okay.
How is the live show going?
It's going great. It's going great. We're just about to announce a new member of cast because Mark Wing Davey, who plays Zaphod Beeblebrox, the original Zaphod Beeblebrox, is a professor in New York and a professor of drama, and he also directs plays, and he sadly can't make it for the whole tour, so we've got someone standing in for him. A bit early to tell you who we've got for Mark, but we're very excited. We've got a really fantastic person who basically has almost based their whole appearance and career on Zaphod Beeblebrox, playing Zaphod Beeblebrox, except for the 2 heads and the 3 arms. He had to have his 3rd head taken off for the part. So we're very excited about that. But no, the new tour is great. I'm rewriting Act 2. For those who saw it last year, Act 1 is kind of a gallop through the first series. It sort of sets the ground rules and does all the classic routines. Act 2 takes material from the other 4 novels and turns it into a kind of adventure for Arthur Dent, which then puts him back at the beginning, at the very end. So it's a kind of, how should we say, circular adventure for Arthur, where he goes out, experiences some of the high points of the Hitchhiker's trilogy in 5 parts, but then ends up where he started. So then, hopefully, people will go and read the books or listen to the radio series, which, in our view, are the best incarnations of Hitchhikers.
I won't disagree. That's mostly due to the fact that the horrible memory of the movie still lingers in my mind.
The movie was I have very mixed feelings about, because I know the guys who made it worked their socks off to try and really honour Douglas, and it was so important to them to get it right. But I think what the movie did was prove that there are certain things that are almost unfilmable.
Yes.
And there are certain things, I would say this, wouldn't I? But there are certain things which radio actually does really, really well. And the weird thing is that Hitchhikers works incredibly well as a radio show on stage as well, because you're still allowed to use your imagination as well as enjoying the spectacle. The problem I have with pictures and with film is that it's a literal medium. Your imagination, you kind of park. You put your imagination in park, because the film is telling you everything you need to know. And good films, wonderful films that we all love, are the ones which transport us to the worlds that they create. The bad films are the ones that don't convince us. But at no point, usually, is the brain engaged. I mean, after you've seen, I don't know, The Empire Strikes Back for the first time, you might go away and think about the fact that Darth Vader is Luke's dad. But while you're watching the film, you just kind of accept it. The analytical process takes place after the event. The pictures happen in your head with radio, and you know, the brain is the greatest sort of computer-generated imaging gadget in the world. So the thing about the radio show as well, and it's Douglas's daughter Polly actually said she really felt it got the spirit of Hitchhikers. It's kind of a very organic thing. It's happening in front of you, and the audience is part of the show. And what's really fun is we do lots of sort of audience participation, not in a ghastly kind of toe-curlingly cringy way. We don't come and sit on your laps, but you know, we do ask the audience to be, for example, all the Vikings in Valhalla, or to be the diners at the restaurant at the end of the universe. And that makes it fun. And of course, there's lots of silly sound effects. We do actually pour a pan-galactic gargle blaster on stage. We do have a Marvin, which is a droid. It is a robot. And of course, the cast cock up and then have to recover from the mistakes, which is weird, because when we started doing it, I thought Simon kept messing up the lines, you know, the really classic ones, like I could never get the hang of Thursdays. And after the couple of rehearsals, I said, Simon, what's wrong? And he said, well, I'm trying to learn the script. And I said, but surely by now you know it off by heart. And he said, well, no, because we only ever performed this once for the radio. We haven't kept doing it since. This is only the 3rd time I've read this line. And I suddenly realised, good God, yes. Because, of course, in radio, you know, you do a read-through, you might do a quick tech rehearsal, and then you do the take. So it was still new to the cast, which is pretty cool, really, I thought. So anyway, that's sort of, here I am. I'm really trying to say, come and see the show, because it's fun. It's really great. I don't think, we are coming up your neck of the woods. I know you're in the Carlisle area.
Yeah.
We are, I haven't got the tour list with me. I might disappear in a minute and grab the poster from the wall, come back and read it to you. But it's all on www.hitchhikerslive.com. Hitchhikers Live, all one word. Please come. You'll love it. HitchhikersLive.com.
Here we go. This is how professional I am.
Sound effects, very good sound effects. Slightly dodgy biro. I'd say that was probably a green retractable. One for the hitchhikers there.
Well, just to upset one of my co-hosts here, Mark, I believe that you had
Adam.
some. I believe that sounds wrong. I believe that you have some questions of hitchhikers to ask and bring up.
Um,
Mr. Mark.
Go on,
yeah,
Mark.
well, Hitchhikers for me was the kind of gateway into science fiction.
Yeah, for you and many others, the legacy is incredible. Sorry, carry on.
No, it's hold on again. I've lost my train of thought now. My first question was it was just something that occurred to me the other day. I assume you've read the 6th book.
Yes.
Yes. Is there any intention to kind of produce that at some point?
I have to take the Fifth Amendment on that.
Fair enough. I enjoyed the book, but the thing that it suffered from was that it wasn't Douglas.
Yeah, I think Owen would say Owen would agree with you, but Owen wouldn't use the word suffered. Owen would say the thing that differentiated it was because it doesn't have the Douglas voice. Yeah. I actually really enjoyed it because Owen is such a fun writer, and what I liked about it was that it was an interesting, different take, and it doesn't cross over anything that's gone before, and it was nice to. Owen's got such a lively, chatty, light touch that I thought it was really fun to read it, and I didn't see it as a crime against humanity. Because let's face it, who would, if offered the chance to write a hitchhiker novel, turn it down? I just think it was brilliant. It was offered to someone as good and as honest and as respectful of the source material as Owen was.
Absolutely. It was. I was flagellating myself while reading it because I was not enjoying it as much as I should have been. I was reading it thinking this is really good, but it's not good enough, which is a really strange and unfair reaction to have to it.
I think it's understandable. I don't think it's very easy to get one's brain out of one particular universe and then move it just an inch to the left for another universe. It's very hard to do, and I think it's a bit like, when you've been really ill, you've had the flu or something, and you on the 3rd day when you finally surface and you kind of stagger about wobbly legged, but everything. I always think it's the kind of thing where you hear a piece of music that is really, really naff, but for 5 seconds it sounds all right because your brain has been sort of rebooted. I'm not saying that what Owen wrote is naff and you should, some kind of stuporific state will make you appreciate what he did. I think what he did was brilliant, but it's almost like you have to reset your brain to read it.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Anyway, sorry, Mark, I'm interrupting.
Now, the reason for asking that was that I have the completist gene, and I want a complete set of audiobooks.
Yes.
I mean, these are things that have resided in my car since they've been released because they're just great to just kind of throw on, and you know them so well it doesn't really matter. It's not distracting from driving or anything.
It's comfort food, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's a world and we all need that. We all need that. Even the people who push against all the barriers occasionally need to go home and just have sausage and mash. That's how it is. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just to change tack a little bit. One of the other things that I've always loved is the Goon Show.
Yeah.
So I noticed that you did the was it At Last the Go On show?
Yeah.
Did you have to pour through a lot of the back catalogue for the clips for that?
Yes. that was the documentary we're talking about, aren't we?
Yes, not the remake now.
Not the remake. No, yes, we did, and I relied very heavily on Ted Kendall, who's the restorer who since has been the restorer of the shows for the BBC Audiobooks and latterly Audio Go. Because although I knew quite a bit about the Goons and so on and so forth, and he was the guy who sort of could come up with, I'd say, what is the most completely fantastic sound effect in the Goons show? And he'd come up with 6, and we'd then go through them. But the thing I really loved about doing that documentary also was the fact that we went down to Spike's house in Rye in Sussex, which I'm not saying it was an ugly house, but Spike called it the Blind Architect. And we went in and Spike sat us down. I was with Mike Poynton, who's a writer, researcher, and a lovely guy. And we sat down in Spike's living room, and I set the mic up on a boob right in front of Mike, put Spike in his chair. And he was going on about, I've never, this is far too much hard work. And then he spoke for about 3 hours about the Goon Show. And afterwards said he'd never spoken so much about it since he'd done it. And the best part of that documentary for me, it was great to have all those clips, but it was the fact that Spike totally opened up about the Goon Show. And it's quite interesting too. It's funny you should mention the Goons, because the other day it was Spike's birthday, and I'm friends with Jane and Sile, his daughters, and I've got a letter from Spike who's thanking me for repeating Goon shows, because the following year we repeated about half a dozen Goon shows on Radio 4, and of course at that time it wasn't there was no Radio 7 or Radio 4 Extra, so Goon shows weren't repeated much. So he's thanking me for doing it. And I realised at that time that Spike used to go on about how the Goon Show nearly killed him, and his epitaph would be, wrote the Goon Shows and died. But it's funny. Actually, he loved the Goon Shows. He knew he gave it he did give it a lot of his health.
But well, that's why he was suffered so much for it, though, because he clearly wanted it to be as good as he could possibly make it.
I think you're right, and I think
entirely self-induced pressure.
Yes, it was. He was, as he put it in the interview, he was earning his place in heaven, and I think it's interesting. I work with quite a lot of well-known people, and one of the things I've realised over the years of working with people like Spike is that you can meet Spike. I mean, Spike is not a good example in a way, because if you got him in a down mood, he'd be utterly horrible to you. Yeah. Although he was always really nice to me. He was absolutely lovely to me. And I was warned about him by other producers, oh, careful of Spike, he'll go for you, and so on and so forth. But I just treated him with respect and affection, and I got the same back. So I think it depends on what you put in was what you got out. But the point I'm trying to make, excuse me, is that really talented people who create works of, how should we say, art, for the sake of argument, whether they write songs or they write comedy or so on, you get closer to them through their art than you do if you get to spend time with them. I'm absolutely sure of that. That's the real person coming out there. And people like Spike or, I don't know, Brian May, or, people I've worked with, I realise that you get as close to them through their work as you do if you ever met them and were able to spend any time with them, which is interesting. All the people always say, oh, I'd love to meet so-and-so, I'd love to meet so-and-so. And you think, well, actually you have in a way, if you have their records or their scripts or their books or whatever it is, that's them. That's them talking directly at you in the most revealing way, because, there's nothing more revealing than writing something. So anyway, there's a little bit of odd philosophy for you.
Excellent. do you want to take this in a different direction, Matt?
I will say.
Sorry, Matt. Can I just add something though? We are working on bringing back a stage Goon show.
Oh.
Which is along the lines of the Goon Again thing we did in 2001. That's okay. That's a very active thing that's going on at the moment.
Right, so I just give you my credit card at the end of this.
Wasn't the Goon Again one? Wasn't that televised? I recall seeing that being performed on TV somewhere.
No, that was the last Goon show of all. I think you're thinking of.
Ah, that's probably it then.
I'll tell you quickly about Goon Again. Not because I'm trying to sell tickets, but simply because I wouldn't try and do this if I didn't know it worked. But it was the 50th anniversary of the Goon Show. I promise I'll get off the Goons in a minute.
Oh, it's fine.
But it was really interesting. We did this documentary in 1991 for the 40th anniversary. And for the 50th anniversary, I was talking to Andy Seacombe, Harry's son, who's now become a big mate, but Andy at that time was a stranger to me. And we had a chat, and I'd said to Spike and Harry, start again. In 91, I said to Spike and Harry, I'm going to start again. In 1992, we were doing Flywheel, Shyster and Flywheel, the Marx Brothers radio shows. And when we interviewed Spike for that interview I was just talking about, Spike said, I'd give my right arm to be in that Marx Brothers show you do. And I said, you don't have to give any limbs, just come and be in it. And he was in it, and he loved it. But because he said that, I said, Spike, do you think there's any way of taking the early Goon Show scripts, the stuff that wasn't kept? At that time, nobody knew of any recordings. Some have since surfaced, I should add. But the first three series of the Goons were pretty much lost. I said, is there any chance of getting some of that material and getting you and Harry together with Michael Bentine to do it? And Spike said, oh, I'm not sure. I'm not sure I have the joie de vivre to do that now, so on and so forth. So I said, well, think about it. And because I was interviewing Harry for that documentary, I said the same to him. Harry was lovely. He's such a nice man. I went in and his, Lady C came open the door and said, hello, ducks, call me Myra. I can't do the Welsh accent, but she's just lovely, lovely, lovely. She didn't say ducks. That's awful, but you know what I mean. It was just like walking on your favourite auntie and uncle. It was just so easy. And I said to Harry, would you do it? He said, if Spike will do it, I'll do it. And I thought, oh, great. And then Michael Bentine was the third one. And I said to him, if Spike will do it and he's thinking about it, Harry will do it. If Spike and Harry will do it, will you do it? And he said, and this was on the phone. I was interviewing him the following week for this documentary. So he said, I'll think about it, dear boy. So he came into the Paris where we recorded the interview, the Paris of Legend, the studio where we used to do all our comedy shows. The first thing he said was, I hope people remember Michael Bentine because he was a comedy genius at a level with Spike. But Mike was very interested in the occult in a sort of benign way. And he came in and he said, I've been thinking about your suggestion, and I've had a word with Peter. And Peter thinks it's a very...
Oh.
We have appeared to have lost Dirk Max again. Intermission. Da, 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 da,
Hello.
Hello, hey.
God, I'm really sorry about that. I was just chuntering away, and then suddenly nobody said anything. I thought, God, this must be boring.
No, someone's cut the wire between Carlisle and Manchester.
Yeah, some Bentine fan. Hey,
Yay!
Anyway, sorry. I don't think I'll tell that story again. I don't know where it ended up. Was I going on and on about the Goons?
We got as far as Peter Sellers, and then it all went wrong. So it was like you invoked Peter Sellers' name and technology.
Peter cut the call.
Yeah.
Michael said Peter didn't like it, so that was that. Ask me another. I'm bored with that.
This is how Peter said.
Is that what I said?
I think we've just lost
Peter's very cross with us.
Right, nobody mentioned the name. Obviously, Peter Sellers is like the Scottish play at this point.
No, I was spouting on about we did do the show later on, and it went really well. And the fact that there were kids in the audience laughing, that was the thing that got me, because they didn't know who the Goons were or anything, but they were just falling about laughing at the script. And I thought, this stuff transcends the performers who originated it. It actually works in its own right. That was a wonderful moment.
Well, it's primal humour, isn't it?
It is, and it's something about because some of the gags are so... I mean, obviously there's stuff in the Goon Show that's dated and so on, but there's also a bunch of stuff that's just magic, surreal and silly. And then occasionally there's just really, really bad jokes.
But to this day, the entire "How do you know what the time is?"
I do lectures with that to kids, when we do student lectures and so on. And they piss themselves laughing, and they don't know it's the Goons. They don't know where it comes from. It's just funny because, funny's funny.
Yeah, it's also the rule of 3 times isn't funny, 5 times is funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's that whole thing that Spike used to do of pushing the guy. Did either of you see Hitchhiker's Tour last time?
I didn't.
There's no fake. No. Just make sure you come this time. No, but we do a Milligan gag in the second half. Not the Milligan gag itself, but we take the Milligan tactic of pushing, making the audience wait longer than it is wise to do so for a tagline. And it invariably works. Invariably works. And the longer you make the audience wait, even if they start looking at their watches, when they finally come back with you, when you pay off the gag, it's just a wonderful moment.
So after that brief intermission, known as Monkeys in the Works, get on that, Adam. So I've got a few questions. Most of them are about a subject that's really, really close to my heart. One of my main introductions to radio in my youth, when I was about 8 or 9 years old, was the start of the superhero radio plays that started to come out. In particular, the Superman and Batman ones. Now, your first one was Superman on Trial, which was this strange hybrid of a documentary and a drama that was self-aware that it was a documentary.
Yes.
How did that come about? Did you originally intend for that to be just a straight documentary, and you decided to put drama in elements into it? I don't know. Talk us through that one.
Originally, I offered it as a straight documentary, just saying it was Superman's 50th birthday, and it was actually part of my job application to Light Entertainment. That particular program idea, we had to come up with 3 program ideas. 2 of mine actually went through, which was great. Superman on Trial was one of them, but the trial idea came because I didn't want to just do a documentary. I wanted to actually dramatise some bits of comics, because I had a feeling they'd really work dramatised. And so I had to figure out a way where we could talk about Superman in our world, but also go into his world. And I think probably at the time there was something like LA Law, one of these legal, a bit like Suits now or whatever, Boston Legal, one of these legal American dramas on TV. And there were always these courtroom scenes. And I sort of just thought, hang on a minute, how do you, it's a good way to find out the background of characters, to sort of put them up on the stand and have them questioned by both a friendly and a hostile interrogator, i.e. a defense attorney and a prosecuting attorney. So it kind of grew from that. And then, okay, so what if Superman was brought to trial? And I sort of remember the stories where he was in kryptonite handcuffs and helpless. So, it could be done. And I think it had been done. I think found out later. And then I thought, oh, okay, and how about if Lois was defending attorney and Lex Luthor was the prosecuting attorney? And then from that, who would be the witnesses? Well, obviously people from Superman's world. But, oh, hang on a minute, how about if we can get people from our world? There was a real crossover. And that was the great bit. So we had Jeanette Kahn, who was the president of DC Comics at the time, Dave Gibbons, who was still then riding high on Watchmen, the success of the comic book with Alan Moore. And then the really great one, which really happened at the last minute because he happened to be in Broadcasting House and I heard he was there, was Adam West, who I had come in and give evidence as Adam West. And then as he left, Batman entered, which was a great kind of mind-bending sort of moment. And it seemed to work very well. I listened to it. I remastered it 2 or 3 years ago for cassette release and was able to add back in some of the scenes I'd cut out to fit the slot at the time. But there were bits about, I wasn't allowed to direct it because I'd only just joined the department and they weren't sure they could trust me with actors, so someone else directed it. But I persuaded him to let me do the post-production so I could add all the noises. But the original was quite tame. I sexed it up a bit for this re-release with more of my sort of wham bam stuff. But it was quite low key at the time, but it was brilliant because what I did realise was that comic books do translate really well to audio. Although the one thing I did discover was that comic books are much wordier than you would think, even though they're basically a visual medium. If you literally take all the lines in a comic book and have them read by actors, it makes for an incredibly clunky script.
I absolutely know what you mean, because I'm doing something along those lines at the moment for a fan production,
Oh, right.
And I know I mean, not only do you have to take on board the wordiness of the people who are speaking in the speech bubbles, you've also got to direct what's going on the printed page itself.
Yeah.
So you've got to take both those into consideration when you're adapting these things. So I totally know and I feel for you there.
Yeah,
But it was great. It was a great realization but the other thing was, the thing about a well-written comic of that time was like a well-written screenplay, because the construction was, if you look at a comic book, if you're, I'm not talking about anime, let's talk about Western ones. You start with the front cover, which is always, going to try and hook you in. Then the first page was always a big flash panel, full page panel with another piece of big action on it. And then you went into the individual panels, and however they were laid out, always the last panel on the page, in other words, the bottom right hand panel, was always the panel that made you, with the job of which was to make you turn that page. And you look at any comic book, look at that panel, there's always a "what's this?" or "you mean?" or whatever it is. There's always something that makes you want to turn the page to find out what happens next. And that was a very good excuse me, that was a very good, I think I learned about what makes a good script from that, the fact that you need to want to turn the page to know what happens next. And it sounds like an obvious thing, but lots of people don't realize it. I read a lot of unsolicited scripts, and many people don't realize that you've got to make your listener or viewer or reader or whatever, your audience, has got to want to know what happens next. And many people don't seem to get that. And that came in good stead when we then got onto Batman Nightfall, which was the first Radio 1 series, where Matthew Bannister was looking for a daily drama series. He'd reinvented Radio 1, he'd kicked out all the old DJs, and he wanted to have a daily drama. And I thought he wanted some, kind of one-armed amputee, single mother, lesbian, drug addicts. I've got nothing against lesbians, drug addicts, one-armed single mothers, but try and find every cliche of gritty drama and put it in one thing, was what I presumed he was looking for. So I thought, well, there's nothing there for me, because I'm resolutely lightweight and frothy. And we had a meeting. He came into my tent and was sort of, people were pitching stuff. And no, he wasn't buying anything. And in the end, I thought, well, I might as well. So I put my hand up and said, okay, what about Batman? And he said, yes, just like that. And I thought, holy smoke, on Radio 1 as well. And then he said, but can you do it in 3-minute episodes?
Oh.
That's when I thought. And I said, yeah. And then I walked out the room going, oh, my God, how the hell do we do that? And there was an article. I was in the Writers Guild, and there was an article by Alan Plater, who's a very senior, very serious writer, who said it's impossible to do good drama in 3 minutes on radio because word of this got out. And I thought, who the hell am I trying to kid? I'm never going to do this. But I thought, hang on a minute, no, there's got to be a way to do this, because that's what comic books do. Every page is an episode, and it ends with a cliffhanger. So how do we do this? And then it became, the writing of it became, hopefully it's not too obvious. I mean, I listen now to Batman, and I'm very pleased with it, although there are moments where I sort of squirm a bit. But there is a kind of sine wave that runs through it. If you listen to it all edited together, you can hear that every 3 minutes there's a climax. But it's a rather slow sine wave, so you're not kind of aware of it. If you saw it as a diagram, you'd see it. And excuse me. And I realised that every episode basically consisted of about 3 sections, which is you come in and you must reprise what's going on, but without appearing to. Ideally, what you do is come in and hit the floor running with something that's just starting up as you reprise what's just happened. Then you have a bit of plot exposition for this episode, how you're moving the story forward. And then, usually towards the end, you would then have some climax in the episode which would involve a big revelation, a new character entering, a major bit of action, some cataclysmic event, something which then the final lines of the scene would bring you to make you want to listen to the next one. So it was kind of the equivalent of a comic book page. And it's amazing how that has sort of really stayed with everything I do since. It became the comic book thing, which I was doing for fun and was kind of like couldn't believe how lucky I was that I could be doing this, actually turned into quite a good teacher for me. Sorry, I have now finished making that point.
Batman Nightfall. And I promise I am not just blowing smoke here. Batman Nightfall is one of the most influential things I have ever come across in my life. I remember when I first heard it back on Radio 1 back in the day, and it blew me away to the point where it was the very first thing I ever pre-ordered. The moment I found out it was coming out on audio tape, it was mine. Here is the money. It's not out for another 3 months. Here is the money. Well,
I'm not, without being funny, because everything is, at the end of the day, it all comes down to human ingenuity. It was meant to blow you away, because I wanted. But when I say that, it's because I wanted it to blow me away. Mm-hmm. What I set out to do was if it's funny, I don't listen to a lot of radio. I do. I mean, I listen to Radio 4. I get up, and I don't listen to the Today program anymore. It's too depressing. But I'll listen to the comedy shows, and I'll catch. I don't listen to a lot of radio drama because I find it's too dry for me.
Yeah.
And the point was, I wanted to create something that I would actually want to listen to, and that was the point. It needed to blow me away. I wanted something, and there were moments when I was working with Paul Dealey, who was kind of like my technical collaborator. Paul did all the mixing, because in those days when we were doing 5.1, it was all mixed live. I mean, seriously, they should have videoed this Paul at work mixing live. 10 fingers on 10 faders, all going up and down all the time, like watching a classical pianist. Wonderful. But the thing was that it was trying to find ways to thrill ourselves, and there were just moments in the studio like 3 a.m. because of course we were frantically mixing the one before the one that was going out, sort of thing, where you go, I don't know, something, what was a good one? Oh, the whole fight with the Riddler in the belfry at Gotham City Centre, and it was like finding, do you know what he could do now? He could whack the Riddler in the face with a bell, and it wasn't in the script. But we said, yeah, we can. Okay, what do we need? And we go around and think, right, we need a sort of swooshy noise. Then we need the world's biggest clang. Then you need to hear the guy hit the floor, body fall, and so on. And we'd spend an hour putting this effect together. And then you put it into the drama and you play it and you just go, yes. It was just one of those. And that was the thing. It was, what I'm trying to say to you is, this wasn't a cold-blooded exercise in fooling you into parting with your money as a pre-order on that cassette. We were as into it, doing it, as you were listening to it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's sorry.
So that's something that comes across in that it is such a labour of love, and you can hear every second of it whilst listening to that.
Yes. And that's the trouble with this bloody lark, with radio, because it's the most when you make that connection, it's not like it's actually better than pictures, because I've actually got inside your head, or what's inside my head has gone inside your head, and you're getting off on it just as much as I did. It's telepathy, and it's a fantastic thing.
Yeah, and I've read every single version of Nightfall that's come out, the original comic, the collected edition, the book, the Junior's book. I've even read that one for some unknown reason.
I've got both here. I've got Denny O'Neill signed my hardback version, though. That's my proudest possessions.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's actually fed into a question I was meaning to ask. Were you a comic book fan before you started doing these radio dramas going in, and how big of a fan are you?
I was a big fan. Yeah, I was. When I was 8, my parents used to work in children's homes. They used to. My dad trained in youth work, and my parents ran children's homes. In fact, they ran the Eau de Garenne in Jersey for a while. The infamous home where all things happened. And I should tell you immediately, nothing happened when my mum and dad were there, but that's another story. But I was brought up in Jersey. But when we came back to England in the early 60s, the kids used to get these comics there used to be, piles in the sort of playrooms of stuff, and I used to borrow them. I was good. I always took them back, but there were things like Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen and all of that.
Oh yeah.
It was the early '60s, so it's still kind of golden age, and there was those 80-page specials and things like that. And it was just such an exotic world. It was, the comics with all the adventures of these amazing characters, and then you got all the ads like, sell grit, the newspaper is making money, or whatever. I mean, you first saw an Action Man when it was called G.I. Joe, those somewhere I wanted one. But the thing was, and I remember reading Spider-Man and getting that Marvel was different from DC, because whereas DC's heroes were pretty much untouchable, I think the first Spidey I ever read was Spidey catching a burglar in a room, putting his belt light on him and saying, you better come quietly because my ever-readies are nearly out. And you kind of got that different world that Stan Lee and Steve Ditko were creating. And I loved those comic books. And then, you grow up, and I got into playing in bands and all that stuff, So, and then when I got into light entertainment, around the time I was pitching Superman, I spoke to DC Comics, Phyllis Hume, dear friend from DC. She's no longer there, and I said to Phyllis, look, I want to do this. She said, I think it's okay, you can do this. And I said, but I don't know what's going on in comics, and can you get some? Is there anyone who can tell me? I think Mike Carlin, who was editing Superman at the time, got to me and said, look, you really need to read John Byrne's retelling of Superman, because after Crisis on Infinite Earths, where they rebooted the whole franchise, John Byrne kind of retold the origin story on Superman, pretty traditionally, but really nicely. And I love the idea in that, by the way, that Luthor is a businessman. He's a politician and a businessman and can't be touched because he seems to be legal, and Superman would seem to be some kind of illegal bully to chase him, which I thought was so much cleverer than the mad sort of Luthor in the films. I was so disappointed in that Kevin Spacey Luthor in that Superman Returns film. It was stupid. It was that film was stupid on two levels. One of which was Kevin Spacey not giving Kevin Spacey a really good Luthor, which was a politician, rather like the character in his House of Cards, which is brilliant on Netflix. But and then giving Superman a son. No. Anyway, so I digress. But it was this. It was. It's the John Byrne retelling then got me into and then Mike Carlin said, and if you're going to read that, you've got to read The Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller. And so I read Dark Knight Returns. Dark Knight Returns I was reading on the train home from the BBC. This must stop. It was like, my God, what is this? And that got me straight back into it. So for that period of time, from about 1987 to 96, when we were doing them, I was back in the world of comics, and it was fantastic. I'm out again now, but no, I loved them.
I do feel there is something I need to bring up here, because somewhere on the Ethernet, my younger brother is screaming at me. Yeah. He's listening to this, and he is screaming. So, hi, Andrew. Because me and my brother, we would actually spend a Saturday night listening to Nightfall.
Really?
It would be, the lights would go off, you'd have the little side light on, no light, and just Nightfall playing. And it's some of the happiest memories.
Actually, I have to say, my influence over my children is limited, but I've got 3 boys who are now grown up. But actually, they've all done that themselves. They were listening to Nightfall with a light out. I think and that's one of those memories. There's a wonderful bit in the first Christopher Reeve Superman movie. That is a wonderful film on many levels. It doesn't work on all levels, but it works on two very good levels. And one is where you see Clark in bed as a boy, and you hear the radio is on quietly in the room, and it's dusk. And I think there's something. I think Richard Donner really hits something there about the nature of how we share these adventures that move and inspire us. That was the one thing, and I'm just waving goodbye to my boys. Have a great time. That was one thing, and the other one was that opening, the classic Superman opening with the old newsreel of the Daily Planet building, and then the curtains open. Man, that still puts chills up my back. The old comics, the first Action comic, and the that whole thing of going into that world. That's the lights out, lying in bed and just letting your imagination soar. That's what's so great. That is the only reason to do radio, because it sure ain't the money.
But you mentioned there about you listen back to Nightfall and bits make you squeal or squirm. There is something in there that makes me squirm.
Go on.
There is something in there that makes me squirm, and it does it every time. And I have to ask this question.
Yeah.
The noise when Bane breaks Batman's back.
Oh God! Right? Yes, I know. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, you don't have to tell me what it is, but I just have to say, every time I wince, that gets me.
Really? Oh, gets you in a good way.
Oh well, it affects me quite physically.
You're not going.
I'm not
really,
but
you're
going.
You're not saying. Are you saying to yourself, "God, that's a crappy sound"?
No. I'm going.
Whose back did you have to break to replicate that sound?
Well, they hadn't invented Radio 4 commissioning editors at that time, but if they had, no, they're wonderful people. No, that was. No, if I tell you, I'll spoil it. I'm not going to tell you.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking here.
If you told me you've hated it, I'd tell you what it was.
No, I don't hate it at all.
No.
Every time my hands come up to my face, and I go.
Do you know what? Well, I tell you what was good about that is the way that Bob and Peter played it, because I think that then puts you in the zone to believe it. Mm-hmm. Good actors are like that. I mean, I love Bob as Batman because he wasn't like the "I'm Batman" thing. It was this. It wasn't like that. We deliberately did, because of course by then we'd had Michael Keaton playing Batman. Because of course we had our Michael Gough as Alfred, but we deliberately, to me, the Batman. I'd love to have done Batman. If I could do Batman again, I'd love to set it in the 40s, when it was supposed to take place. And he is a detective, and he is an acrobat, but he's not superhuman. It got too superhuman. And the gadgets got too ambitious, and I think something about Batman. There ought to be a slight wrinkle in the knee of the tights, you know. But the thing about Bob, what I love was he's actually a song and dance man, and he was a very handsome guy, a very very good looking man, Bob. And there was something about him where you could believe that by day he could be. I mean, I'm talking visuals, and this is an audio thing, but you know, people carry themselves, the way they look carries through into the way they present themselves, and definitely there was something in Bob which he could have played it. He definitely could have played it. That was the inspiring thing about doing. And Superman, Stewart could have played Supes, because they looked right as well. And it's weird, but in the studio you need that a bit. You do need the guy. If you get a sort of 200-pound guy who's bald and dribbling, and he's going to play Superman, it's pretty tough to, suspend disbelief, even if you're not doing pictures.
Yeah, true story. I've got a top 5 of my favourite actors who have played Superman, and
have you? Okay.
I do. This is legit. This is absolutely legit, because I am genuinely from youth a Superman fan, but not mostly of the Superman comics, but of Superman media. Now, obviously, number 1 will be Christopher Reeve. He is the benchmark for anyone to have played that role.
For me,
number 2 is Stuart Milligan.
Really?
Because I think he dipped into a lot of different personas and different performances to recreate that role for radio. I hand on heart believe that he was a fan of the George Reeves series, because I think he tried to replicate George Reeves as much as he could. And I think for the most part, he succeeded.
Yes. I think he did. The only thing, this is not a criticism of Stuart, this is a criticism of me as a director. I think one of the, I wouldn't say I ever had a problem with Stuart. I hadn't, and I love him, and we still work together. In fact, he played Dick Cheney just last year when we were doing a thing about Washington 9/11. Him as Dick Cheney and Lorelei as Barbara Bush. That was pretty flipping weird, I can tell you. Lois Lane as Barbara Bush and Superman. But I think the thing was, Stuart first played Superman, and I wasn't directing. And I would, and because I believed in always being consistent with, if we were going to keep doing these, which we ended up doing, it being consistent, I never wanted to change what he'd started, but I felt I would have liked his Superman to have been slightly less stiff. I think I think in that first thing, in order to, he would be Clark and he's talking like this. Oh, hi, Lois, I'm this, and I am Superman, and I must be quite strong and resolute. And I think, yes, it needed going that far, but I think if we ever do Superman again with Stewart, I would say he doesn't have to be that far away from Clark. That would be my only. I think that would be my thing, and I think he would prefer it too, because I think it was a funny old business. DC liked it. DC said don't change it. That was it. When we did Superman Doomsday on Beyond, which actually came before Batman Nightfall, and that was when we revisited. No, we did Adventures. Sorry, we did. Adventures.
Yeah, because I remember listening to the original half-hour shows of Superman Doomsday and Beyond on Radio 5, I think.
Radio 5. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
That's right.
It was Radio 5, and then it was not long after Nightfall you started putting out the Superman serials.
But those Superman serials predated the Radio 5 ones.
Yeah.
They were Radio 4 as 15 minutes.
And then you brought it all back. The thing is that I have a distinct feeling when you got back to doing these 3-minute chunks on Radio 1, I think you gave yourself the ability to try to not maybe fix things, but tweak things from a sound point of view.
Yeah.
It definitely sounded like a more coherent and more polished up audio performance once it got aired on Radio 1.
Well, it's amazing what you can nip out. And if you take a few ums and ers out of a conversation like the one we're having now, we could make ourselves sound super articulate rather than slightly bumbly and Saturday morning,
Yeah.
What do you mean?
And I think that's probably what I did, because you can always tweak. I sympathise with George Lucas up to a point when he did the special editions of Star Wars. I can see why he changed some of the stuff he did, and then of course it gets too much, and then it's a bit like Photoshop. You don't know where to stop. Anyway.
I suppose I better wrap this up by going into Superman Batman territory. Shall we talk about the other ones that you did? In particular, you did an American Werewolf in Paris for the Mark and Raj show.
In London. In London.
In London. I keep on calling it Paris for some reason.
Matt, you're fired.
I know. I'm going. Bye. And then, of course, you got to your Spider-Man and you had your Judge Dredd's.
Yeah.
Now, how did you come about all of these?
It was... well, we had to follow Superman, really, and Spidey was a really kind of. We did the Superman, we did Batman, and then we were trying to find the next, because negotiating the rights took the time, and so after Batman had gone so well, Matthew said, "Okay, what else can you give us?" I said, "Well, I've got Superman. I'm pretty sure I can cut those down as 3-minuters." So we put in Adventures and then Doomsday. By which time we'd done the deal on Spider-Man, but the deal on Spider-Man actually came in because Marvel had a London office and they'd heard Superman. And Tim Quinn, who was working there, who was still a mate, and he was a really bright guy who was always looking for opportunities, heard it and got in touch and said, "Look, would you like to do Spider-Man?" To which I said, "Yes, please." And the other thing about Tim was when he rang me, he also rang Brian May. So he said, "And how about if Brian May did the music? Because he's quite interested." So I kind of, took me no seconds at all to say, "Christ, yes." And then we all met at Brian's, and Brian turned out to be as big of a comic geek as I was, and sci-fi anyway, Flash Gordon, all that stuff,
Oh, yeah.
And so it was a marriage made in heaven, really. And so I not only made 2 new mates, but we did Spidey, and we got to go ahead from Marvel, and the deal was done. and Spidey I love because, oh sorry, that's the front door. I'm sorry, chaps, keep going. Talk amongst yourselves a moment.
What do you want to do with the questions?
I was going to say, once we've come to the end of this bit,
Hello, it's my brother. He's here, but make yourself a cup of tea.
right, well, we shall start wrapping this up then if you want. So you
Yeah.
can.
Yeah, but Spidey. The thing about Spidey was it was such fun, and it was so much fun. I could put the outtakes in the credits because it was just balmy. And William DeFries, who played Spidey, who's now living back in America doing audio stuff. It is just superb. He just gave it everything, and that was fantastic. So that happened, and then because of course when you do something that works, then somebody else hears it and wants to take over. Wants to suggest other things, and then Paul Powell, who's a comedy writer who does loads of things now on TV, but at that time was one of the writers in Light Entertainment, said, "How about Judge Dredd?" And we looked into Judge Dredd, and that was possible. And then we did the two Dredds. We did the Day the Law Died, which is my favourite because of, again, Bill DeFries playing Judge Caligula, which I just still kills me to this day.
That was a hell of a performance.
That was funny. That was funny, pure funny. And Apocalypse Wars, which I was slightly ambivalent about because they were broadcast on the anniversary of the 50th anniversary of Hiroshima, which I kind of felt was a little bit tasteless.
Okay. Yeah.
But that was unfortunate. That was just unfortunate timing. But the Day the Lord Died. I mean, Bill DeFries' Caligula was just so funny and just, I don't know, moments. I can still remember lines, him with his Judge Fish, his rubber duck in the bath. Rubber ducky does not love you. Just magic moments of comedy arising from brilliant performers in the studio. Those are times when I just hug myself because I can't believe I'm lucky enough to have to be working with these guys.
I was just going to say, it's just a shame there doesn't seem to be any commercial releases for these other audios. I mean, is there anything like a rights issue that's been preventing them?
It comes down to money.
It's just a shame. Absolute shame.
When the agreements ran out, companies Marvel is now owned by Disney and God knows who, and DC is owned now much more actively by Time Warner, and they are looking to make money out of these things. We went in to talk to Marvel about doing a new Spider-Man series about 5 years ago, and they said, fine, if you give us this amount up front, and the amount was a telephone number, and then guarantee us the same amount, whether or not you make the sales, we need you to pay that same amount every year you release it.
Oh. Wow.
There's no way you could do it. So it's greed. And the stupid thing is, you can't argue with accountants about these things. You can't say to them, but don't you see that this actually will sell, even if this doesn't sell in amounts that allows you to buy a new Lexus at the end of this year, what it will do is create a market. It'll open the market up, and more people will buy your comic books and go see your films because it's keeping the legends alive.
Yeah.
But no, they don't get that. They don't know the power of radio. It's very hard to explain to people who don't know what you can do with radio drama, how good it is. Which is why when you get someone like Neil Gaiman, who knows exactly how good it is, coming along, he will let you do stuff like Neverwhere. I mean, I'm bringing it up to date. I'm not deliberately trying to sidetrack the conversation, but thing is, there are people out there like Neil who do it, and then you do it, and then it's funny to go on Twitter and see people saying, "Oh, but it's got no pictures. I won't like it," and "Oh, but I really did like it." There were pictures, but they were in my head, and people are ignorant about what this can actually do.
It's a true story because my first experience for any of the particular storylines in the comic books were through your radio plays. I listened to Nightfall before I read the comics there. I listened to Superman Doomsday and Beyond before I read The Death of Superman. And I had a very definitive imagination in my head as to how these would play out visually. And it's a thing when you then read these comic books and they're not what you would have imagined. It really puts a whole different slant onto how certain storylines play out.
Yeah. And yet, what I felt was it was a good synergy though, because the comic books illustrated the world that we were creating in sound. So if that was the world in your head, what we were doing didn't turn it upside down. It just augmented it. Yeah.
No, I mean, if anything, it was a very good compliment. What goes on in your head wouldn't be there unless you were listening to it at the time. The audio is helping fuel your imagination, so it's all good.
Yeah, Neverwhere's a good example of that, because when you're in London Below and you have the Minotaur attacking, it is so visual.
Yeah, I was pleased with that. But you see, what I think the point I was trying to make, or a point that's worth making, is that wouldn't have been possible if I hadn't done the superhero stuff 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't have developed the sense of... It's the tools, there's certain sound effects. I mean, when at the end of Neverwhere, when the Angel and Creep and Vandemar are swept out of the big door, those were Superman wishes. They were Superman wishes. Simple. I mean, everything gets reused. Nothing ever doesn't. In everything I've done, there's always a Batman cape flap. That's my which is just somebody. We need a cape flap for Batman, and Bob. We didn't have anything in the studio. I ran out of the studio, went to the lobby reception area of the sound house. Somebody had left a big old anorak sort of oilcloth coat on a hook. I ran in. Dealey hit the record button. I just flopped it once in a big, what'em, like that. Ran back out, hung it up, and it was perfect. And I've used it ever since.
That's
Anytime
great.
anyone falls over, sits up, gets down, walks about, does a sudden move, it's the Batman cape flap. I shouldn't say that now because we'll hear it every time.
I'm going to be there with a bingo card getting ready.
But the thing about Neverwhere was that, like the Beast, it's not just it's a big animal, so it will roar sometimes and it will charge at you, but it's breathing and living, and it's in that frame all the time. If it's moving across the back of the picture in your mind, it doesn't stop breathing while it's moving. It doesn't stop moving. It doesn't stop foraging for morsels in the grass. You start to think of what behavior is this thing doing? How would that translate into sound in such a way that it creates the picture that's in my head of doing it? And that's what I've learned from doing the superhero stuff, is that if you can paint as complete a picture, if the world that exists around your central character continues existing while they are doing other things, then you have created a real world. And that's the point about the creature. It's moving and breathing all through the scene, even when people are talking in the foreground about what they're trying to do. And that's the real essence of doing it. And that's the thing that will probably kill me, because also it's very, very hard work to keep that level of energy up at every level. It's funny, Sam Bayar, who plays Random in Hitchhikers, she's an actress, but she's been doing an audiobook lately, and she's able to record herself and edit herself, and she sent me a message saying, God almighty, why didn't you tell me how hard work this is? And it is, because of course pictures are easy. You can see what's there. In this, your mind is pushing into it, and you're closing your eyes, and have I painted a picture? Am I in that world? Is this really creating that world? No, that creature's not breathing there. It needs to breathe. Or no, this character's moving about, the voice is moving about, but the body isn't. I need to add some Foley cloth here, or some footsteps and so on. So I'm not complaining, but Neverwhere was exhausting for me. I went straight from that into some comic relief thing for Radio 3 and something else that I had to do. And by the time we had a couple of weeks off after Easter, I was just a vegetable. It was amazing. Anyway, sorry.
Earlier on this year, it was end of last year, we dipped our toe in with an adaptation of The Death of Optimus Prime from IDW Comics as a radio drama. And I, even doing it as just something that I was doing in my spare time, that came close to sending me round the bend. So you have my utmost respect for being able to do this.
I did a 2-minute long, and I do stress a 2-minute long short about 4 years ago, and that was all full production. That took me a good part of 4 months.
Yes. But on the other hand, short is harder. Short is harder. If you have to get something down to 2 minutes, that's the 3-minute episodes were absolute swines because you couldn't run over. And so it had to fit. And so the script had to fit, and the noises had to fit, and it had to all get buttoned out at 3 minutes. And you cutting something down is harder. Douglas used to say that when somebody wanted a half-hour script, that was worth so much money. But if they wanted a quarter-hour script, that was actually worth twice as much.
Yeah,
because it was twice as much work to cut it down to quarter of that. Yes, if you really do it well. Anyway, sorry.
Are you okay for another 10 minutes or so?
I think so. Can I just check?
Yep. We'll fire through these questions and let the poor guy go.
Yeah.
Right, I'm back.
Okay.
It's good. 10 minutes. Good.
Yep. We've just got a group of collections. Guess who was at work all day yesterday? We have a group of questions that we've been given to just quickly fire through. If you're okay with that.
Yeah. Good.
Okay. Matt, do you want to take the Burns questions first?
I also take the Burns questions. Some of these have already been answered, so I might skip a few.
Yeah.
So the first question was, this is Ralph Burns. You can find him on Star Dubbing on Twitter, by the way. Were there any licensed properties you would like to do on radio that you haven't had the chance to do?
Yeah. Yes. Next question. Oh, loads. But loads. I mean, I don't know where I'd start. There are ones that nearly happened that didn't. We were talking to Fox about doing an Aliens prequel long before the Ridley Scott thing, Prometheus.
Oh, I'm in a really bad place now. You've said its name, and I'm not allowed to start screaming.
Oh.
Well, I know we were talking about either a prequel or an in-betweeny before. This was before they did Alien Resurrection.
Oh, right.
And that would have, and I had a really good storyline, and I wrote a 15-page treatment for it, and I was very pleased with it. And it absolutely, and I had the script for Resurrection, but the thing was, I didn't just have the script for Resurrection, I had the Joss Whedon script. And that was, I don't know why they didn't shoot that script. That was a good script. But anyway, point being, it didn't happen. Another one was Dark Knight Returns, Frank Miller, which now, of course, they've done as an animation with the most with the thinnest possible sound design on it. Yeah. I thought it was a very sad waste of what could have been a fantastic piece. I wanted to do that with Adam West, you know.
Oh.
I also heard a story that at one point, I don't know if this is true or not, but you approached David Soul.
Could be.
Yeah, I remember reading that in a comic book at one point. It was like David Soul approached to play Dark Knight Returns on the BBC radio. I remember reading that.
I think we were putting out feelers for who was local, and he was in England at the time when we thought we might do it. But, you know, all these things, this is why nowadays things have changed. But, you know, 15 years ago, I thought you never tell God your plans. That's the same. Nowadays, everybody tells everybody their plans on Twitter or wherever, and I think it's a mistake. So I say these things to you now only because there's no earthly chance of them happening.
Yeah.
You know, but if there's seriously something I want to do, I don't talk about it because I think that puts the nix on it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I agree.
But you know, it is that, going back to what Matt said earlier about the wow factor, about that. I was knocked out by this factor. It's what would really knock me out. The problem nowadays for someone like me is, I mean, radio is always a problem because it's very hard to persuade rights holders that it actually is insanely great, unless they're Neil, in which case it's very easy because he knows exactly. But the other thing about it is that so many other people are doing it, and there's this explosion in amateur radio stuff, which is great. And when I say amateur, I mean that in the true sense of loving it so much you want to do it yourself to the best possible standard. But it does put people like me in a bit of a spot because I'm very happy about that. But at the same time, it makes trying to think of something that no one else has thought of that much harder, because there's so much more out there. Not necessarily all of the great quality. So you have to kind of be clever. But, it's what's really promising is that Neverwhere has been such a success, and that BBC Radio 4 commissioned it, because I spent 15... I first met Neil 20 years ago, as it were, and over the last 15, I've been trying to tell them we should do something by Neil, and been turned down, partly because I'm an independent and we don't get many slots available to us. So it took someone in-house to finally make that connection work and make them go for it. And now they've gone for it, they're thinking, oh, we're getting a big audience, which is something I was always telling them they would do. I'm not saying I'm being clever about this, but, I don't think they realise quite how big an audience there is for really well-made sci-fi, fantasy, just genre stuff can really go. But they're always wanting to make their audience younger. This has got a huge audience of all ages. So I think it's very promising that Neverwhere's worked so well and people liked it so much that maybe we've got another chance to begin to explore those worlds. And of course, the BBC have got the budgets for it. This is the thing. I can't easily go and make something like Batman or Superman if I don't have a big broadcaster backing me, because I don't have deep enough pockets, A, to pay the licensing rates, but B, to afford the cast and the studio time. And it's all very well doing Kickstarter, but everybody's doing Kickstarter now.
Kickstarter's a thing that's going to fall apart in the next 6 months.
I don't think people's patience is going to last, because at the end of the day, I don't know. It's a bit, it's a bit like that movie Bruce Almighty. We're all beginning to feel a bit like Bruce, where he becomes God and he gets all the prayers. It's like your whole room being covered in Post-it notes of people asking you for things. And I don't know about you, but Facebook and Twitter, just your friends, like support this cause, put money here, give this to this charity. And I'm not saying any of it's bad, but I'm saying I don't think human beings can cope with too much of it. Anyway, we digress. Back to question.
Right. The next question is how, I don't know how the way he's articulated, how do you feel the youth of today could get interested in radio drama who don't already listen?
Very good question. Really, is if we make more radio drama they'd like to listen to, which is why Neverwhere has been such a shot in the arm for it, because if the big broadcasters like the BBC begin to broadcast more stuff like Neverwhere, more of the youth of today will listen to it.
Agreed, because that's what totally pulled me into radio in the 90s, was those superhero comics adaptations. We can do this. Yes.
Good.
I think you may have already answered this, but would you do another Batman serial if you got the chance?
Yes.
Rufus, I would like to hear that. And then the last one from Ralph is, what do you feel are outstanding radio productions that have perhaps been overlooked?
Anything by John Dryden, who goes on location. These are not superhero or genre pieces. This is just absolutely gobsmackingly superb radio productions. His most recent one was set in Mexico, but he's done more stuff set in Egypt and so on. And he actually goes and records locally, and it's cinematic. The scripts are really tight. They are movies for your head. He's superb. John Dryden, Dryden. I think it's called Goldhawk Productions. I urge everybody who hears this to go to his website and check his stuff out. He is an inspiration to me. He really is fantastic. So that's who I really rate.
We've got 3 final questions, all from a gentleman from Canada. Now, this is surprising, the fact that the people outside of the UK that are still are like fans of your work. Now, all 3 of these questions.
Favorite places to go.
Yeah. Now,
how do you get 50 Canadians out of a swimming pool?
I don't know.
You say, please, can you get out of the swimming pool? They're lovely people. Actually, I had a wonderful time. A quick anecdote. I had the pleasure of working with briefly Leslie Nielsen. What a gentleman. What an utter gentleman. What a lovely, lovely man. And he said something to me which was one of the wisest things I ever heard. He said, "For the longest time, I thought my life was a blackboard on which wisdom would be written. It took me the longest time to realize I was supposed to do the writing." I thought that's a blackboard on which my life would be written. It took me the longest time. Anyway, it was basically get off your ass. It was good. Okay, sorry. Back to our gentleman from Canada.
Right, because I know we're running out of time. I'm going to merge all three of these questions into one long question because I know I'm going to pretty much get a long response back. Chris's questions are: what brought about the latter three series of Hitchhiker's Guide?
Yeah.
Were they daunting to put together, especially in using a posthumous performance by Douglas Adams? And how did the all-encompassing ending come together?
I can answer that with 4 words. First answer is Douglas. Second answer is yes. The third answer is with difficulty. Okay. They came about because Douglas had just finished Mostly Harmless. He felt he'd written the ending of Hitchhikers, and he'd heard Superman on the radio, and I think at that point, although he was very he was disappointed that the Hitchhiker TV series wasn't better than it was, and for all the money they spent, just didn't look like the money was there. He then wrote the last 3 books and put this full stop on everything. And I think he, almost as soon as he'd finished that Mostly Harmless, he was unhappy that he'd killed everyone off, but he decided to leave it for now. And then realized the radio was so visual, was reminded. I mean, I'm sorry, it sounds like I'm blowing my own trumpet, but I'm trying to analyze quickly what happened. And then got in touch with BBC and said, "This bloke Dirk Maggs, is he available? Would he be interested? Da da da." And of course, I was round his house before he put the phone down. So, God, yes, I'm interested. My boss called me down the corridor. "Would you like to go to talk to Douglas Adams?" Well, that's no problem. And of course, I was interested. And so, really, Douglas asked me to do it, and this was the thing. It's a kind of familiar story which I've told over and over, so I won't reprise that because we eventually did do it. Legally it was tricky. It took about 10 years to sort all the legals out, and the awful thing was that Douglas died before it was all over. But I'll tell you now here's a good story, and it's a quickie. When we did last year's Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy tour, when we went to the Mayflower, Southampton, which I might add was packed to the point where they opened the upper circle, which is never opened, in order that people could go up there and stand to watch the show, which is pretty cool. I'll tell you who came to see the show. Douglas's mum came to see the show. Jan, Douglas's mum came to see the show. Now I'm very lucky because I know the family very well, and we're all dear friends. The Hitchhikers is a family. If you're a fan of Hitchhikers, you're part of a very big family, and included in that family, are the Adamses themselves, and Douglas's daughter, Douglas and Jane's daughter Polly. But the thing is, Douglas's mum came with his sister Jane, not his daughter, not his sadly late wife Jane, and they came to the Mayflower, and I'd met Jan a few times before, and Jan didn't know. I found out later, Jan didn't know that Douglas had asked me to do Hitchhikers. She thought I'd come along and sort of grabbed it for myself, which is interesting because I could see how that could happen. There's an awful lot of properties in the world taken over by people who then exploit them into the ground. That's something I would never ever do with Hitchhikers. It always with me is, what would Douglas do? What would Douglas do? How can we keep Douglas front and center on this? And if you come and see the show, guys, as you must do, you'll know this when you see the show. However, Douglas's mum came to this show, and of course the audience is full of people in dressing gowns and towels. And she said a couple of very interesting things to me. She said, My second husband and I used to listen to The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy in bed at night because it was going out at 10:30 at night originally. She said, and we could never get through an episode without falling asleep. We just didn't get it. Which was one interesting point. And then the next thing she said was, and Douglas used to read me bits he'd just written and laugh away at them, and I wasn't sure why they were funny. And I thought, oh, that's a bit sad. And then the third thing she said was, all these people in dressing gowns and towels, it's a bit like a cult. I don't think I like it. And I said, I tell you what, Jan. And she looked, but I know that sounds funny, but if you think about it, it's sort of rather sad and poignant because this is her son being remembered that she's talking about, and she doesn't get why it works.
Yeah.
And so I said, tell you what, Jan, why don't you watch the first half, and I'll give you a quick. I'll nip round and see you at half time and see how you're going. If you're still feeling a bit uncomfortable about all this. Anyway, first half goes on, and I play drums in the band on stage and do sound effects with Ken Humphrey, so I'm pretty busy. Went back to the dressing room to grab a Coke, and there's a text on my phone. There's 3 texts from Jane, who's sitting with Jan, her mum, Douglas's mum, watching the show. The first one is, Mum loving it. The second one says, Mum says, oh, wouldn't Douglas have loved this band? And the third one is, Mum standing up, cheering and clapping.
Oh.
And it just made my day. Anyway, we met afterwards in a bar, and the first thing that Jan did was she came up to me and slapped me around the face. But what she meant to do was a sort of Morecambe and Wise, tap on the face, but it was more like, I said, was it that bad? And she said, no, sorry, it was wonderful. I loved it. Anyway, and I chatted afterwards with Jane about it, and James, Douglas's brother. And for the first time ever, she realised that the biggest achievement of Hitchhikers is it's funny, because she's in a room full of people who are just roaring with laughter at all the funny stuff that Douglas has written. And I think that was the first time she realised that the real gift that Douglas left people was the fact that this is just wonderfully funny stuff. And that was, for me, made everything that we'd been through to get to that point worthwhile. It was a magic thing. Douglas's mum realised that his gift was such love and laughter, which is something very hard to create, in life. So I've wandered right off the question. So apologies to Steve and Callie. I had to tell you that story because that's what made the whole thing come together for me. That it was the humour that worked. But with regard to the working Douglas in, that was really a technical issue, not hard at all. He'd read it. Douglas had said to me he wanted to play a part, and I said, which part? And he played me this thing of him doing the part, and I said, oh, sure you don't want John Cleese? He said, no, I want me, you fool. and he was worried about equity, British actor equity. I said, oh, no, you're giving all these actors work, no problem you playing a part. And we actually had that in the show last year. Sadly, that section won't be in the show this year because there's a rights clearance issue with the recording, but the fact is that that was a piece that really, really worked, and that's why that was in there. And yes, wrapping up the 5th series was hard, but Douglas, the conversations I had with Douglas about Mostly Harmless, and they weren't long, were him regretting that it was so negative at the end and wanting to hoping he would do another book which would bring them back or extend the adventures or something. So that was why I dared put a sort of coda on for people who, if people wanted the ending as in the book, all they had to do was stop listening at the point where we did that ending. Mm-hmm. Anyone who wanted a possible variation on the ending or an extension or a possible new pathway could then listen on to the coda. And so we did the coda. And interestingly, when I read Owen Colfer's book, Owen actually quoted that coda as so I thought, oh well, it's kind of canonical now. But it was contentious at the time. But the funny thing about this is, and it's fandom generally, people have been critical of what we did, any decisions we made. Oh, why did you do this, and why isn't it Peter Jones being the voice anymore? To which you can't go down and hit them with a dustbin lid and say, because he's dead, you twat. But the thing is that after a bit, people have kind of got that we did what we could with what we had. But always, and I can't stress it enough, this is not about us. It's about Douglas and his gift of laughter and a philosophy that is so intriguing and challenging and questioning about the everything that, you know, doesn't make sense. And I think that's what we're doing. We're preserving that with a lot of love in the room, love and laughter in the room.
That story has brought a massive smile to my face and made my day, I think. That's
Cool.
That's absolutely lovely.
Made my year, I have to say.
I can imagine. Well, I realise that we're running a lot later than we originally planned to be, so we will draw this to a close now.
Well, it's been a pleasure, guys. It's been a real. I hope this has been, you know, of interest, and I mean, hopefully we'll be doing, you know, more stuff that we can talk about. So.
Well, yeah. Once some of the little things that you've not mentioned but alluded to.
Yeah.
Then we'd love to have you back on to talk about some more things. It would be absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Well, thank you, Adam, Matt, and Tickles. What's his real name? You can tell me. Nobody's listening.
It's Mark.
His name's Tickles.
It's Mark.
Tickles. It's Tickles.
But he's now going to be called Tickles for the rest of time.
Yes, I think it should be.
Thanks for that, Dirk.
Sorry. Oh, you're fine. Come see the show. I'll buy you one. Okay. It's been a real pleasure, and have a good week.
Well, you too, mate. And once again, thank you so much for your time today.
Okay. Take care.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.